Are property investors greedy? What right have they got to own so many properties when others don't even have shelter? Well, that's one of the questions we answer in today's question and answer podcast with Belinda Botzolis, who's been a valuer for over 16 years and now brings her passion and years of experience to her role as one of the property strategists at Metropole. She also gives a valuer's tip that may just save you some money, as well as answering the question about which renovations add value and which don't. So welcome to today's show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Today's another question and answer podcast day, where we're going to answer your property-related questions. And today I'm joined by Belinda Botzolis, one of our property strategists at Metropole, who's been a valuer for over 16 years, including a long stint at one of Australia's leading national valuation firms. Now, Belinda brings her years of experience as a valuer, tax depreciation specialist, as an investor as well, to advise our clients at Metropole as a property strategist. So I think she's an ideal person to answer some of your questions. So welcome, Belinda.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Now, Belinda, you received a question recently on social media. You've got a very large social media profile on Instagram, on TikTok. And in fact, that's how we first met ages ago. I was very impressed with what you're doing. So tell us about this question that I guess it's the sort of thing that we all get a little bit of by some people who are wondering, are we really doing the right thing?
Yeah, Michael, I do a lot of very short, very quick little videos, and then I get a lot of these type of questions. So we had a question from, let's call him Thomas. So Thomas was one of my followers on social media, and he made the following comment, but it really is a common theme that I do come across. So here we go. So Thomas wrote, he said, "It seems wrong that people are worrying about buying their third or fourth investment property when the most vulnerable people in society are worried about where they're going to sleep at night." So he was concerned that we're building our economy around what should be seen as essential to human survival as a shelter, and that we are, maybe he's coming across saying that we're collecting property when it should be seen as something essential. So what are your thoughts on this topic, Michael?
I understand where he's coming from, and I've seen that a lot as well, because almost all analysis of Australia's property market focuses on the problems associated with rising house prices, with affordability issues for first home buyers, as opposed to discussing the benefits that rising house prices and the wealth effect actually create. But look, first let me explain that in Australia, about 30% of people rent their accommodation. And somebody's got to provide this. Some people rent because they can't afford to buy. Others rent because of the stage of the life they're at the moment. Some are rent investors. I know you and I have got a lot of clients together who actually rent, but they own their own property investments elsewhere, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Sure. So, and some, maybe just because of their lifestyle, people are laying down their roots later in life. So they haven't actually chosen where. So there's always going to be tenants. And in this question, Thomas points out that some people are worried about having a roof over their heads at night, having shelter. And I do agree that there's always going to be disenfranchised people in our community. And personally, I believe it's our responsibility as a community to look after them. I also believe it's the government's role, and that's also of charity. And interestingly, only last night I got in my inbox a request from another charity, and we support a lot of charities. I believe it's my job, having become my responsibility, having become financially independent, to give back to the community. So there's no doubt that, yes, there are problems and there is a shortage of social housing in Australia. But for those who choose to rent because they're not ready to buy at present, In many countries, the government provides large amounts of rental accommodation. They provide social housing, like we should and are not providing enough of, and they also provide just rental accommodation. But that doesn't happen in Australia. There's just not enough public housing. The government's actually chosen to leave a large portion of the rental accommodation provision to private landlords like you, like me, like people listening to this podcast. And the government in Australia only provides a small amount of public housing, and it's not building sufficient for those in financial hardship. So there are really two different arguments. Those in financial hardship, yes, should we be providing more? No question about it. But what about all the others? But I guess like other services, some of them are provided by the public sector and some by the private sector. I mean, if you think about hospitals, there's private hospitals and the public hospitals, private transport and public transport. So that's the system that's worked in Australia. So if investors, the private element, the private sector, isn't providing the accommodation for tenants, the situation would even be worse, Thomas. In fact, currently, we've already got a rental crisis. And if you look back, I think it's because APRA and the regulators restricted lending to investors a number of years ago. And that resulted in a shortage of rental accommodation and rising rents now. We've got the lowest vacancy rate we've had for ages, haven't we, Belinda? And rents are going, they're skyrocketing.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot now. I think it's a lot in the media. We can see it by just purely going on realestate.com and seeing the number of rentals. There's not many.
No. So I think it's worth pointing out, though, that the percentage of first home buyers has actually been higher over the last couple of years than it's been for a long, long time. Now, we know that, but it's because the federal and the state governments gave lots of incentives, and it came about through COVID. And to be blunt, I don't really think Belinda was aimed at the first home buyers. It was really aimed at the building industry to help create jobs, and it did a good job of that.
Yeah, that's what you find all throughout history. We've had different levels of grants to the first home owners, and it always trickles down, it does, to that building sector, one way or another.
Sure. Well, the government recognises the building sector creates jobs, and if a first home buyer buys a home, they've got to buy carpets and televisions and other things. So nothing new, though. Rising house values are going to always be an issue for first home buyers, even though the recent government's even brought in some more elements of relief. And starting in July, there's another round of grants where people can buy with 5% deposit, and they've lifted up the limits of what you can buy. So, yes, there are still incentives. Now, I know what I'm going to say next is going to annoy people like Thomas, but the Reserve Bank of Australia has published a range of research that calculates the benefits of the change in wealth due to house prices rising. And they've unsurprisingly found that household wealth, due to the change in houses, impacts the growth of household consumption. In other words, when people feel wealthier, they spend more. And for the average Australian, their home, we're not talking about investment properties at the moment, Belinda, but their home is their biggest asset. And in simple terms, if they found their home value has increased over the last couple of years, as it has, because most homes around Australia have gone up around 20%, and people are paying off their mortgages with interest rates low, the wealth effect of rising property values means that people spend more. It helps the economy grow, and that's one of the things that stopped us falling into recession when we were all locked down with COVID. But the opposite happens when house prices stall or when they fall, spending growth slows. I guess that makes intuitive sense. If somebody who owns a house feels wealthy, they inclined to borrow against that wealth, they increase their consumption spending, and this means that rising household wealth and the associated growth in household consumption feeds into other parts of the economy. It creates jobs, it increases the level of employment, which in turn feeds into better than average wages increases, which would have probably been weaker in a scenario where house price growth was weak or non-existent. So, as I said, I know this is going to annoy some people, but in my opinion, the high house prices in Australia are the reflection of, I guess, living in the best country in the world, in a world-class city, and in general, our big capital cities are on the seashore, beachside cities that people would love to live in. In fact, there's a long queue of people wanting to live in this country. You don't see people queuing up for 20 years to live in Indonesia, do you, Belinda?
No. I mean, maybe after COVID, a holiday will be good, but for a lifestyle change, yeah.
So rather than wishing for cheaper house prices, I believe we should be improving the financial situation for Australians in general, because when house prices fall, this would lead to a weaker economy, higher unemployment, problems in our banking system, slumping construction sector that employs, 10, 12% of our population. Sure, affordability would improve if you dropped house prices. But crashing house prices isn't going to build up home ownership rates. On the contrary, a house price crash may even lead to even lower home ownership rates if unemployment's higher and if banks suddenly decide, well, I'm actually not going to lend at the moment, I'm going to be more careful who I lend to. So, Belinda, sorry I went on a rant, but I understand where Thomas and others are coming from, but I think it's worth just seeing the other side of the argument.
Yeah, I think so too, Michael. Now, you've made a good point. What you've touched on there, and I think a lot of people need to understand, is property values aren't one-dimensional. There is a lot going on. It's almost like the tip of the iceberg. What you see on the surface, and below that, the flow-on effects of what could happen potentially if we see too much of a fall in house prices can have. But yeah, it is definitely something that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about.
Now, the question was, are you greedy owning 3 or 4 investment properties? Well, it depends upon the purpose of why you're doing it. And in my mind, I believe it's everybody's responsibility to look after their financial independence, because heaven knows the government's not going to do it or do it well or spend your money well. And who knows if the pension's going to be around when you live longer. And I know that I am able to give to charities. We've run charity balls. We give substantially. We look after a number of hungry children in Australia that I hope, because of the charity I've given, they don't go to school without a breakfast in their belly. We give to overseas as well. So I don't feel guilty being wealthy because it actually helps me, but I also believe it's my responsibility to help other people up the ladder. And that's part of the reason for the podcast and the blogs and these sort of sessions as well.
You know what I think, Michael? I don't think there's a greedy property investor. I think you can be a greedy landlord, and that's by not looking after your tenants properly. You be greedy, you're not maintaining the home for them. There's a leaky tap that they keep complaining about. So I think as a homeowner, you have a responsibility because you are owning somebody's home. You may own the house, but you don't own their home. And I think that's where you can show your generosity through the wealth you have developed through your property, growth, is being a good quality landlord. And that's where you can show, and that's where you can give back to the community and to home ownerships for people.
That's a good point, because unfortunately we have come across in our careers some slum landlords, and I just don't understand how they do that. Now, Belinda, this was meant to be a session where I asked you questions and you got me to answer the first one, which took a little bit longer. So can I actually ask a couple, because people leave these questions on our Property Update website, on the blogs that you have there, on the blogs that I have there. So, guys, if you're listening to this and you've got a question for Belinda or a general property question, leave it in the comment section of any of the Property Update blogs or on our social media. And Belinda and I'd love to help you. This is a depreciation question. And Belinda, before I ask it, you've got a bit of a background in this field, haven't you?
Yeah, I am I'm not a quantity surveyor, but I am a registered tax agent with the Tax Practitioners Board, and I'm qualified to sign off on depreciation schedules. I do them for, homeowners, new homes, old homes, commercial, residential, all that.
Sure. Well, that was in a previous life, and now you're a property strategist and you help use all that experience to help our clients at Metropole move to the next level. So Susan R. left a question and said, I'm a little confused about tax depreciation. Is it only available for brand new properties, or can I claim depreciation if I buy an established property? Actually, not a bad question, considering we're getting up to the end of the financial year and tax time, Belinda.
Yeah, if you're an investor rather, and you own either a residential commercial property, it's a tool. It's another tool in your tool belt, Michael, when it comes for claiming your tax. And you can claim depreciation definitely on brand new properties. That's a no-brainer. You claim your capital improvements, which is your bricks and mortar and your hard landscaping. And you also claim your plant and equipment, which is your carpet, blinds, cooktop ovens. Now, the misconception is if you've got an older home, you can't claim depreciation at all. But what it means is older homes, you can't claim plant and equipment if it's secondhand. But as long as the home's built after 1987, you can still claim the capital improvements. Now we need to work out the date that it was originally built and what it cost to build at that date. So the original cost base. So if the home was built in 1990, you work backwards and figure out what it will cost in 1990, and you've got 40 years from that date to claim depreciation. So it's still definitely a little bit of, juice left in the tank, so to speak, for claiming depreciation. But also homes older than 87, you can actually claim somebody's previous improvements. So if there's been an extension out the back, a new kitchen, bathroom, there's a swimming pool, and these were, as long as it was done after 1992, you can claim these as structural improvements. And sometimes, Michael, it's $1,000 in depreciation or $3,000, not a huge amount, but it's still your money. You're still entitled to it. And it's something that, as I said earlier, if you are an investor, it's worth exploring. The cost of the report, tax deductible, you pay for it once, use it for the life of the investment. A lot of things there in your benefit.
So you don't make it up. You get a quantity surveyor to do this. There are some specialist companies that do this and do a good job, and it's nice and easy. Now, Caroline also Caroline left a question on our blog, and I know this is an area that you look at a lot in your social media following about what you should be doing if you're going to be renovating your home, where it's a good area to invest. And her question was, I'm looking at renovating my home. What areas of expenditure are going to add value, and where would I be overcapitalizing? Now, we actually don't understand if this is her home or an investment, but I sort of assume she's talking about her home. But it's smart that she's thinking as an investor, not purely emotionally, Belinda.
Yeah, I think when we are looking at the numbers in our home, we have to take out a home ownership cap, take that off and put your numbers hat on, because when you're talking about, in her words specifically, overcapitalizing is a numbers word, which means that she doesn't want to spend more money on her home than the added value she's going to gain at the end. Okay, so I would suggest to her, there's certain areas in your home that you can spend the money on, and it's worthwhile because, as they say, for instance, kitchens sell houses and bathrooms are the ones that you need to do. But the areas you got to be careful on are all the extra bells and whistles. And with the cost of building at the moment, there's also a fine line you need to draw between how much should you be renovating and adding and extending versus a complete knockdown rebuild. So this can be another question for her as well. Also, really, really understanding the area in which you're renovating, because if you're in those more affluent areas, the market's going to expect a lot from your home. So you need to meet that market in order to get the most bang for your buck. But we also can experience a little bit of what I call undercapitalization, where some people are looking for a really cheap reno, a budget, a Bunnings kitchen, IKEA kitchen, nothing wrong with that in certain homes, in certain areas, but the market in other more affluent high-end areas are going to expect a little bit more in terms of the fixtures and fittings. So if you're spending the money on your home, make sure that you're meeting your market and you're going to get $2 to $3 for every dollar you're spending, and to also examine 2 or 3 options. Could you be getting better bang for your buck if you sold and bought something else? Okay. Because the market tends to pay a little bit more for something that's done. The shortage of trades, materials at the moment, it can be a very costly budget blowout scenario. So I would suggest to her to be very careful with analysing her numbers and meeting the needs of her and her family. Does she need an extra bedroom, an extra ensuite? Is there a study? There should be a study. If there's no study, Caroline, I'd be considering a study with everyone working from home. But that's only because the market, that's what they expect. So as I said, take your hat off and put your numbers hat on, because the numbers should work in your favour in the end.
An area I've seen people undercapitalise also, Belinda, is where they haven't got enough money, so they just do the kitchen renovation and not the bathroom, or just the bathroom and not the kitchen. Now, again, this isn't as much if you're living there and you're doing it over a period of time, but if they're doing that for their investment property, the place is getting a bit old. If you're marketing it, people don't want just half the house done up.
No, I always say as a buyer, you have boxes that you want to tick for your dream home. So you're walking hand in hand with your partner and you're quietly whispering so the agent doesn't hear you and you say, oh, babe, isn't that kitchen lovely? Or, you walk through the bathroom and go, oh, God, that bathroom's ugly, isn't it? So, 15 years ago. And the more things you start picking, the less you start taking off in your mind in the purchase price, okay? The less things that you can pick and decide that you don't want to touch or renovate, the more money you stop taking away from that purchase price and you actually get that premium price for your property. So it's about inviting people into your home to inspect and giving them less reasons to find, things that they want to improve themselves. So if the kitchen's done and the bathroom's done, they're the big money makers. A coat of paint's easy. You can actually do a coat of paint yourself, but to renovate your kitchen and bathroom, they cost the big money. So the kitchen's the big one. That in my opinion is probably the A grade in terms of adding value to the home. The bathrooms, as long as they're functional, it's more of an aesthetic thing. But I think that the less things you give homeowners to look at, the better.
Sure. Now, I want to ask you a question as putting a valuer hat on in a moment. So I'd like to actually have a talk about a tip for our listeners as a valuer. But before I do, I just want to remind people that if they want to take advantage of the property markets that are going to be more challenging this year, why not have a chat with Belinda as one of our property strategists at Metropole? And you're seeing that her experience as an investor, as a professional, as a valuer, brings a depth of experience. There's too many armchair experts out there at the moment. Everyone's got an opinion on property, and at the moment they're worried about the geopolitical problems, about interest rates, about inflation. And well-meaning friends and family are going to say to you, oh, maybe you shouldn't do something now. Now, I don't know what your circumstances are, but I think it's a great idea to get advice, to get support, to get help through your investment journey with somebody who's already been there, done that. And Belinda's just one of the team at Metropole who can help you. So our job is to first of all start at working out where you are and work out where you want to be, see what we can help improve, what we can fix if there are problems, and how we can get you investment quality returns. So what should you do? Just go to metropole.com.au, find out about our range of services, leave us your details, and let's discuss your options. So we offer you a time-tested system, a proven track record, true on-the-ground experience, and since we don't sell properties but have access to every property, our buyers agents can, well, I was going to say level the playing field, but they actually put the odds in your favour. So Belinda, I gave a shameless plug because I know you're helping a lot of our clients now, because last year anything worked. You could buy almost anything, but boy, the market's different. It's changing in front of our eyes, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess my background, I'm a property strategist now, first and foremost, Michael, but, my experience, 16 years, I've got on the ground experience as a valuer. I have physically walked inside 15,000 properties and 15,000, and I worked it out. I have valued $12 billion worth of real estate in my career. Okay, that's a bit of a flex, I know, but I'm in Sydney and the homes are a little bit more expensive here. If I was in Tasmania, maybe that figure would be a little less, same amount, but a little less. So, and that on-the-ground experience that I've seen always takes me back to that quality investment property. I seen great homes and properties purchased, and it always goes back to the fundamentals, and it's getting that right at the beginning is what's the most important, because the element of time is not in your favor when you make those mistakes. So that has been a true highlight of coming across to work at Metropole with that experience that I've had, is giving those people that real guidance of, the experience I've had and then the team have had to show them the right way forward.
Well, it's part of a big team, you're right. So metropole.com.au and find out about what we do. Leave us your details. And Belinda would love to have just an initial obligation-free chat to see if we can help. And, of course, we'd love to be able to build a long, ongoing relationship. But Belinda, to finish off, I know on the weekends when you go to parties and people say, what do you do? And you say you're a valuer, I bet they've got lots of questions for you. But can you give us one to finish off this time? Just a tip a valuation tip for our listeners?
Okay. I don't have a crystal ball, Michael. So when you see me at a family barbecue, don't ask me what the market's going to do because I won't be able to tell you. But I will leave you with a good little tip. So this is one for those people, and this is a lot of people start off living in their principal place of residence. And, it's a family thing. They might outgrow it and look to buy a second principal place of residence, but keep their principal place that they used to live in as an investment. So that now, we need to understand you'll need to draw a line in the sand because when it's no longer your principal place of residence, it triggers a capital gains tax event. Now, there's the 6-year rule, of course, and you'll need to discuss that with your accountant. But let's say you hold this on for the long term. You'll need to establish what your property is worth the day it no longer is your principal place. And the only way you can do that officially is by getting a valuation done by a qualified professional, and it needs to be a legal document. Look, down the track, you may or may not need this document, but having it done as soon as you leave, two things. A, it's going to be cheaper because if you order one in retrospect, so say 10 years down the track, your solicitor turns around and says, you need a valuation done on that date, it's going to charge 3 times the amount with the valuation company, and just file it away. And if you need it, you've got it there for your peace of mind. And, at the moment, the valuers on the ground know exactly what it's worth. The market's still got a bit of, it's up. So you'll be asking, don't tell them I said this to all the listeners. Get your valuer to value it as high as they can within parameters and as long as it's within range and they've got the sales evidence to support it. But if they can value it as high as possible, that would be in your favor. That's a little
In other words, the capital gains tax free component,
correct,
the bit when it was your principal place of residence, would be higher.
Yes, you want to limit the gap from when you moved out, so what the property is worth when you moved out to what you sold it. And by having it valued slightly higher when you moved out, that means that when you sold it, that gap is a little bit smaller.
Okay. Will valuers listen to your request?
You can try. You can tell them that I said it. So you'll be like, I was listening to Michael's podcast and Belinda said to ask you if, as long as they can support it, Michael, they're not going to.
They've got to support it. And B, they know that you're not selling it so
Correct.
that it's they're not as much at risk. Belinda, I enjoyed our chat today. And so my suggestion is to others who are listening to this, if you've got a question for a valuer, and I hope you subscribe to my daily property update newsletter, just leave the question for Belinda in one of her blogs or in the comments of any of the blogs, and we look at them, we'll read them. Sometimes we answer them online, but I'd like to catch up with you again in a month, Belinda, when we answer another whole group of questions, not just on valuation, but on renovations and those other areas of your interest as well. Thanks for your time, Belinda.
You're very, very welcome, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Rather than my normal mindset moment today, I'm going to have a chat with international best-selling author and my good friend Tom Corley, who's my co-author of our international best-selling book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Michael. How you doing, my friend?
Great, thank you. Now, Tom, I was fascinated by one of your recent daily blogs where you explained that to be successful in this world, you don't have to be better at a million things, at a zillion things like we think we do. You only need to be a little bit better than your competition. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so, Michael, have you ever been to a horse race? And a lot of these horse races, sometimes they're the winner wins by a nose, but the winner gets all of the stakes. The winner gets the full pot. Well, my point is you don't have to be so much better than the competition in order to get the whole pot. You just need to be a little bit better than the competition. I call it the slight edge, and you can develop that slight edge. It's something that, you're in an industry that you work in, and maybe you're even very good at what you do, but so are a lot of other people. What is it that you do that's different, a little bit different, that makes you special? Now, for an example, when I talk to clients, I have a lot of clients. We do financial planning, we do tax accounting and all that stuff. But what sets me apart is I'm the only CPA in the world who has done a Rich Habits study, a study on millionaires. So when my clients are asking me about how to improve their wealth, how to increase their wealth. They know that they're talking to somebody who has a slight edge over the competition. And so it's kind of become a niche. In fact, most of my CPA clients have, or half of them have become financial planning clients just for that reason, because they read everything that I write. They have all my books, and it gives me that slight edge. If I really wanted to grow my customer base, I don't. If I really wanted to, I could grow it 10 times what it is right now because of this slight edge that I have. And that's what a slight edge gives you. It gives you leverage over the competition. And you don't have to be that much better. You just have to have something that sets you apart, some little thing, some niche that makes you special.
Well, that's a bit different to a common belief, which suggests you've got to come up with something huge, something revolutionary, some great invention. I know people want to find the next Google, they want to find the next Facebook. From your Rich Habits study, that's not really the case, is it?
No, not at all. In fact, if you look, you know what a bell curve is. Well, a bell curve is where the majority of the data points are populated in one section, the circle. Then you have these outliers. Well, the outliers are the Zuckerbergs and the people that created Google and Elon Musk's. They're outliers. They're the people at the very fringes of the edge that have this enormous wealth because they did do things that were revolutionary and changed the way we all do business, right? So those people are always going to be out there. You can't plant your flag on the hope that you're going to be one of them. That's unrealistic. In fact, if you talk to any of them, or if you read any of the books about them, you'll always come away with this. At some point, they got a little bit lucky, and that luck sort of pushed them into the direction that they're in. For example, Zuckerberg, he wanted to pick up girls because he had such a hard time picking up girls in college. And so he created this thing that became Facebook that was, I think, just at Harvard. And it was his way of, I guess, getting people to put their information on so he could figure out which girls were the best. So that took him down a rabbit hole, I guess. And Elon Musk was taken down a rabbit hole by being obsessed with science fiction. He read every science fiction book there was. And at an early age, he decided, I think he said he wanted to be an astronaut. He wanted to go into space. So he went down a rabbit hole, and he's never come out of that rabbit hole. It's a little bit of life forcing you into a certain direction. And so those people are outliers. Now, I'm talking about the average Joe, the average person. If you want to become wealthy, one of the ways to do it is to have a slight edge over the competition, and you'll be very successful in life if you do that.
So in other words, what you've got to do is you've got to develop, you've got to hone some skills, some knowledge in a particular field in your industry and come up with a slightly better way of doing things, but it only has to be slightly better. And then when you look at what's happening in the world, that old 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, there's always a small group of people who get 80% of the business, 90%, whatever it is, it's not an exact figure. And then everyone else is just fighting for the scraps at the bottom, Tom.
Yeah, it's true. It's an interesting example came up to me, I guess about 3 or 4 months ago. I built an Irish pub in my backyard,
yes,
right? Out of a shed. Well, I just learned that there's a guy that's been doing this for years. He converts people's sheds to pubs. And this is his niche. So he'll go in and he'll transform your shed into a pub. The guy's a multimillionaire. He has, I think, 4 or 5 flavors that he offers. If you don't have a shed, he'll actually has the relationships with the people that distribute the sheds and manufacture the sheds. And so he'll actually drop a shed off and go to town on it. Well, this is a niche, right? This is unique. This is what sets him apart. He used to build decks. That was what he did. And he said, I'm going to, I guess he did the same thing I did, but he was in construction and I'm an accountant and an author. He decided to take what he did and leverage it. And now he would have never been a millionaire, building decks. He is now because that niche, that slight edge that he has.
I think this follows through with something that I've often realized also when you start something new, whether it's investing in property or starting a business, you think there's a zillion things you need to do or you need to understand, you need to get a handle on. And that's not necessarily the case. There's probably only 5 or 10 core things you need to do and understand well. So in summary, what you're telling us is the majority of successful entrepreneurs, they don't capture lightning in a bottle. Instead, they just become the best at what they do. But Tom, they do it through the rich habits that you've written about in your book and we've written about together in our book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits. They have daily study, they have daily practice, they work hard daily, they develop rich habits, Tom.
Yeah, it's all true. You know, we've been talking about it for years, Michael, and it's all true. It's fundamental stuff, really, when you think about it. It's fundamental stuff. But how many people just don't have a grasp over the fundamentals? Well, we're here, you and I, on this podcast, trying to help people understand that a lot of this stuff of building wealth is really mastering the fundamentals. And in this case, mastering the fundamentals plus having a slight edge. That's what gets you over the hump.
Great. Look forward to our next chat real soon, Tom.
Yeah, me too, Michael.
Well, I enjoyed today's show and answering the question about whether property investors are greedy. I know there are some podcasts out there and some people out there saying that you really shouldn't buy more than 1 or 2 properties because I guess deep down inside their wealth operating system makes them think that that's being greedy. What I'm suggesting is that it's not how many properties you own or how much money you've got. And if you chase them just for money, that's the wrong answer also. But I hope you understood from my chat today that it's not wrong to become wealthy in this country as long as you do it correctly and legally and do the right thing by others in this world. So if you got some benefit from learning this lesson and you know somebody else who would also, please tell them about this show. Please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast and help me in my quest to make more people financially fluent. Now, I've also got a way of saying thank you to you for listening to today's show. If you haven't already done so, go to podcastbonus.com.au. I'll leave a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, and get a heap of reports and ebooks. Just my little way of saying thank you. Now, you can catch me in between these shows on social media. Just look for Michael Yardney or join our private Facebook group where every day I leave a tip, a trick, a hint. Just go to Facebook and look for the Property Update private Facebook group. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?